Hi guys, my name is Daniel YISRAEL. I'm with YISRAEL Family Farm out of Sacramento, California. I'm a full-time apprentice here on the farm. My professional history was in the service arena, so customer service trades, but predominantly in the food service. I was very much connected to food from a young man, and I always wanted to be involved in community and helping improve the quality of life of the communities where I've resided and beyond. It was in that long-term career that I kind of developed this love and intimate connection with food and community. But it also, after a serious health bout, inspired me to want to go beyond that and look at food production and agriculture more seriously, especially just looking at climate change and everything that's been taking place over the last, decade or so. Really, that led me to this opportunity here, and so I just fully immersed into the soil. And I've been finding out that the answers to many things are in the soil. And I've developed a passion now for outreach and sustainable food systems, community development, and just all of the wonderful things that can come from learning about agriculture and how to impact or use that to impact where you live at, and your family, and beyond that into the community. I was a part of the third cohort of the training in applied agroecology program with MESA, and I will be presenting on seed defense. That actual phrase is not so much properly defined. You can find definitions for seed sovereignty. There was a definition that I did find from Sustainable Food Trust, which was that seed sovereignty or seed defense could be defined as preserving, protecting, and exchanging viable, native, open-sourced heirloom seeds. When we think about seeds, in essence, you're talking about infinite potentiality, right? You're talking about the basis of our global food system. I just wanted to mention that for context, that seed defense or seed sovereignty is, probably the basis of, all food sovereignty, because all of the food that we consume comes from seed or should come from seed. And there's also, this idea of what has taken place over decades and hundreds and thousands of years of people who have domesticated certain crops that we can now enjoy. This was another definition that was given, which is the farmer's right to breed and exchange diverse open source seeds, which can be saved and which are not patented, genetically modified, owned or controlled by emerging seed giants. There's a quote by Henry Kissinger that said, "Who controls the food supply controls the people. Who controls the energy can control whole continents, and who controls money can control the world." I thought that was a very poignant quote to this, because again, we're talking about control, right? There's a handful of multinational corporations. Everybody's now familiar with, like Monsanto, for one, are monopolizing hybridized seeds, which are just crosses that have been made on purpose to generate a certain characteristics in plants. You have to kind of get away from the stigma of hybrids being bad, right? Everything that we eat today has been adapted, but when you have these corporations taking these same seeds that are being produced by large breeder farms and patenting them in such a way, and then lobbying with legislature and political avenues to kind of create this system that we have now, then it becomes disadvantageous to small farmers and us, and it's going to affect the food system negatively in that way, because now a small farmer who wants to localize or, acclimate certain crops, that have meaning to him or her, they can be in danger of being fined, being jailed in some cases, even for saving some of these seeds or for trying to reproduce certain seeds or breeds that are now considered intellectual property. Well, this is a huge problem to seed sovereignty, to seed defense. One thing to note, 75% of our agricultural biodiversity has been lost. One great example of some preservation is Peru. There's Peruvian farmers who have been growing, I think it's something like 4,000 different varieties of potatoes for years, all part of their traditional culture. This imagery here is from a book called Farming While Black. What this is depicting here is a practice that happened during slavery and during, large immigrations. It wasn't only Black slaves, but in large part in this country, immigrants would bring their native heritage crops to this land. And, to me, it was just such an amazing point to make. It speaks to the mentality of our forefathers and foremothers. To them, this is how important their staple crops were, that in the middle of this super distressful and uncertain time where you're actually going into bondage, into a totally foreign land, you have no idea where you're going. The idea was that, this is a super important part of who we are, and it has to come with us. And we want somebody to carry on tradition. This really resonated with me because I think we can all remember a time or, have endearing memories, right, tied to certain foods, that our family members introduced to us or cooked for us on a regular basis. And, it invokes these things in us. So what they would do is they would sow seeds into their hair while braiding it, and braid these seeds into each other's hair. In some cultures, they would put them in the hem of their garments for fear that, these things could get confiscated once they cross certain borders. They were successful in doing this because we have okra, millet, cowpeas, different, all sorts of different crops that are not native to the U.S. This act of resistance, it ties seeds intimately to land and liberation, to, carry on this tradition of fighting for, seeds to be able to be traded, cultivated, and continued in families and small farms and large farms alike. The idea of carrying on this tradition of saving seeds, cataloging seeds, developing these crops, and keeping biodiversity alive is a connection between the elder and the younger. The idea is that the elders would preserve culture, preserve the tradition, have stores, have this historical record in place, and then the successors or their successors would then carry on the same tradition. And what we've seen instead is that there's been a rupture or a disconnection that's happened, with that, where now a lot of, younger generation people are not interested in this kind of work, or they're not interested in becoming agriculturalists and farmers, in large part because, again, there's been an effort to portray, peasant farming culture and, farming culture in general as something that is oppressive and limiting. So there's definitely an effort to keep it more corporation controlled, because that will, essentially lead to more easier control of the masses. Whereas if more small families, small farmers in all regions were cultivating seeds, keeping seed banks, keeping able to save seeds, able to, preserve this biodiversity, agricultural diversity, then people will start to become more food secure, and the reliance upon mass corporations and mass production would definitely take a decline. And this was from a seminar that I attended. And as they were passing around seeds, this was one of the seed packets that I was given. And you can see a picture of a gentleman there whose name is Steve Biko. And he was quoted as saying, "The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the minds of the oppressed." If you know about Steve Biko, he was a political activist in the apartheid movement in South Africa. The conflict was based upon race, right? But it also had a lot to do with land. And that's important because, again, when you're thinking about seed defense, when you're thinking about sustainability, connection to land and place is supremely important. You can't grow seeds, breed seeds, save seeds over a period of time if you're in an insecure space when it comes to, land and being able to farm. Looking at that movement, I think it was very closely tied to this form of resistance. We as individuals or even families and small groups are making decisions day to day that either make strides towards the solution or contribute to the problem. And I know that before I came into this space of agriculture, learning about agriculture and all things related, there's so much that I had no clue about and was contributing to. Our brains, right, our minds have been co-opted because, not too long ago in history, people were saving seeds as necessity. This was just part of what you did and the rich, history, heritage, and culture behind it, and how that's so closely tied to our health and our lineages and how we move through the world. I live in what's called a food desert, classified a food desert by the USDA, which means that there's no most people living here do not have fresh produce or do not have access to local, organic food within 1 mile to 2 miles of their home. Plenty of corner stores, plenty of junk food, no access to real food. And that a lot of that has to do with similar things that were happening in the apartheid movement. Hence why we say, it's not a food desert. This is part of food apartheid. The lines of the communities were placed there by people for certain reasons, based on demographics and race and other things like that. When you look at all of that, it is intimately tied to seed defense. If you're in an area where you see despair, you see food insecurity, you're going to be less prone to think that you have a hand in being able to help the situation or have solutions. I encourage everyone to, again, buy open source seeds, heirloom seeds when you can find them, save seeds. Learn how to save seeds if you're a grower. Find your local growers and seed savers and help their mission. Here are some of the references. Like I said, Farming While Black, So Far's Farm Practical Guide to Liberation on the Land, What's in a Seed, The Critical Role of Seed Politics in Food Sovereignty Movement, The Organic Seed Grower, lastly, Seed to Seed, The Seed Saving and Growing Techniques for Vegetable Gardeners. My personal email here on the farm, like I said, I'm primarily outreach coordinator, but I also work in farm operations here. And there's my personal Instagram and also the farm Instagram. Please, like I said, check us out. Give us a follow. I look forward to building more with MESA and friends.